community-centered research is critical, I think, to the learning trajectory because it then enables you to see where research can take you.
I'm Dr. Lamont Repollet, the president of Kean, New Jersey's urban research university. This is Urban Impact, a podcast where we examine the complex issues facing urban communities through meaningful conversations with scholars, community leaders, and others who are driving change. Recorded and produced on our campus in Union, New Jersey, this is Urban Impact. Here are your hosts, Michael Salvatore and Barbara George Johnson.
Welcome to today's episode of Urban Impact. I'm Mike Salvatore, the Senior Vice President for Administration here at Kean University.
And I am Barbara George Johnson, the Vice President of External Affairs and Urban Policy and Research at Kean. With the big news of Kean University's designation as an R2 research institution, we have an exciting conversation ahead about how research at Kean is shaping real-world urban design and community impact.
Joining us today are two incredible guests from Kean University's Michael Graves College of Architecture and Design. We have with us here Femi Fadape, who is a student deeply involved in studying Trenton's Coalport neighborhood. Welcome, Femi.
Thank you.
And we also have joining us is Professor Vanessa Alicia Chiki, an expert in building community and equity through design and design justice. Vanessa, welcome. I've had the pleasure of working with you on the Coalport project, so looking forward to hearing all about that. Let me start with Femi. How did you first learn about this research opportunity at Kean, and what made you want to be involved?
So it all started from the studio project. So last semester we were given the studio project of going into Trenton and targeting kind of like this urban project, focused on the food at first. But then as the project went on and the semester went on, we started to do more research and find out more about what was going on in Trenton. I found out about the Coalport project and how it's kind of like a revitalization plan on Trenton. And that's how I kind of tackled my studio project. And from there, it kind of developed into what I have now.
Well, I'd love to hear a professor's perspective here. Vanessa, from your perspective, why is this project significant, not just for Trenton's Coalport neighborhood, but for the fields of urban research and architecture?
We were looking at a way of tying some of the research the School of Public Architecture was doing with the Watson Institute related to a neighborhood revitalization plan in a Coalport neighborhood of Trenton. And what we decided to do, at least for my studio, is focus within the Coalport neighborhood, specifically a site next to the Trenton Area Soup Kitchen and the Capital City Farm. And we wanted to create an opportunity for students to explore a specific site and look at some options of what could be there. Specifically, we were sort of looking at a evidence storage building that we wanted to repurpose as a community facility.
So let me dig a little deeper into the Coalport project, right? So I am very familiar with the Coalport project, right? The Watson Institute was very involved with the neighborhood on the Capital City Farm, which is one of the few farms that is in an urban center. So it really offers opportunity to the food pantry, which is next door, Trenton Area Soup Kitchen, and also other community vendors and children. There have been a lot of Boys and Girls Club and others have come on the farm. So I see that as sort of the epicenter. We saw it as an anchor asset for looking at the entire area of Coalport, right? And I'll give a little Trenton history before I ask you, Femi, about your experience with Coalport Project and the community, that Trenton has this mantra that Trenton makes and the world takes. And we hope at some point we can get back to that, right? So the purpose of looking at the farm as an anchor asset is what else is going on in that area. You know, the farm sort of drives people to come, pick vegetables and get fresh produce, but then they start to look at the area, right? To say, well, what else is going on here? What is this area about? And there's a lot of, I think, social services and some other interesting things in the area, but obviously development can take place. So I'm excited to learn about why an architect student would be looking at food justice in particular, and how do you connect all of that to this now extended work in Coalport and digging into the neighborhood in particular?
Yes, so it started with the food injustice. in the beginning of studio, I'd made my food kind of project about potatoes because I love potatoes so much, and the story about they grow from underground and they stay underground until you pick them up. But I had the chance to visit Capital City Farms and see the way they operated. I saw children kind of going around picking up the plants. I saw people working on the farms. I got to hear the stories of some of the farmers, inviting other community members to come in and just participate and plant, and then kind of you reap what you sow. And that's where it kind of led into my project about youth development. I saw how many youth were around the area. I saw how much homelessness was around the area as well. So trying to like tackle both of them, but starting from the youth up. So my project started to become more about youth development, and where it became like a center where youth can come in, develop themselves, and then they can kind of avoid all of those traps and all of those other troubles, I guess, that this generation got in.
Nice.
It's really inspiring, actually. The more you talk about it, the more I'm learning that this is more than just a research project in a classroom, right? It's really designed to make a real difference. And that's what we want to believe here at Kean, entering into the R2 Carnegie status. We want to make research not just a project in the classroom. We want to make sure that it has public impact. So, Vanessa, I'd love to hear from you about how we go about doing this, from the classroom to outside the classroom to partnerships. And I know you have a lot of ideas.
This class was a pilot as part of a community engaged learning effort that the university is undertaking. And there's different disciplines that are working on it. But this was a design studio class, which is a very specific type of class within the architecture program where they design most of the times a hypothetical project. Right? They have a hypothetical client. Usually it's a site that we know. But in this instance, because it was part of this community engaged learning project, we wanted to connect it to something that could potentially be realized. And while it is ideas, we wanted to root it in community. We thought that it would be an opportunity to help inform some of the research we were doing related to the Coalport Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. That is the research project, right? So one of the things we've been really trying to do within the School of Public Architecture is try to understand how urban research and our teaching come together, right? And looking at ways of sort of blending that. So this class was a pilot within sort of the studio atmosphere. So the studio class is a class that meets 3 days a week from 2 to 5. It's a 6-credit class. It's a lot of time. The students each were tasked with doing site research, trying to understand the neighborhood, and then each of them had a focus. So Femi's focus was really about youth development and creating recreational spaces. And that came from them walking the site, walking the area, and trying to see where, based off of the observations, how to improve it. We had some students who were really interested in focusing on activating the green spaces. We had other students that were focused on women and single mothers and housing that also includes daycare centers. Right. There was a lot of focus on lead and how the building could be the building and the systems within the building could be an opportunity to help educate the neighborhood, but also work as a means of cleaning the soil. And so it's a really interesting projects that came out of it. We're hoping that they submit for Research Day. We encourage them all to submit for Research Day coming up. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of the research that the students were doing related to Coalport.
Wow, fascinating work. It captures this concept of an anchor institution in the community. It really embodies everything we talk about, what's good and high quality about research too. So fantastic work.
Absolutely. Kean is the only designated university in New Jersey that's designated as an urban research institution. And so this to me really speaks to that mission of Kean. What you described are the social determinants or even social determinants of health, but also the social determinants of economics, right? So it really excites me to see that our architectural students are really thinking about design in ways that impact community. And you're sort of centering community before you even start to put something on paper in terms of a rendering, right? You're centering community. And I think that's so critical to the lead issue, to the green spaces. How are you thinking about remediation even before you start thinking about planning? So to that point, Femi, I want to ask you, how is this experience shaping your career trajectory? How are you thinking about next steps? I know that you're soon will be leaving Kean, graduating and going on to do great things in architecture, hopefully taking all this wonderful experience and sort of the thought process about design with you. So what does that look like for Femi?
Yeah, so this kind of reminds me of kind of how I grew up. So I came here in 2016, and like 2 months later, I joined this program, All in Children's Zone. And it's a program very similar to what I've kind of designed. It's a center for youth development. You can come in every day, you get paid stipends, and they teach you kind of career rules to follow and career ways to just build up yourself, build up your career, and just provide a better life for yourself and for your family as well. So this project kind of just really reminded me of those times. I'm still a part of that program, HUZ, and I guess I'm getting more included into that environment as well. So maybe I'll do something very similar for that in masters as well. For now, the next steps is going into grad school. I applied to multiple schools. I've gotten one acceptance from Syracuse so far. So I'm planning on taking that kind of field in Masters of Architecture and whatever comes out of it. But I'll definitely keep this in mind because I really loved the project. I loved the research that I did, and I love that it tied into a part of my life that I don't think I'd be here without that part of my life.
So when you thought about architectural studies and decided that was going to be your major as an undergrad, could you imagine that you would actually be like out on a farm? Like, what did you think about when you were thinking about architectural studies? Did any of this was this even a thought?
Definitely not. I just thought of math. I thought of drawing. I thought of art. I just thought, okay, architecture. It's like expensive art, so I can make money while I'm doing art. So this was not a part. This was not just. I didn't think of this. I didn't think this was going to come out of it. But just going through the years, going through the motion of undergrad, it's been just amazing. It's been inspiring to see the teachers like Vanessa and where they've been, and how they've kind of gone through school and how they built up themselves and their lives and their career. That's really inspired me to also do something for myself as well.
Just the maturity and growth I see here, right? It's because you talked about how you saw this program early on. And this is where many students looking at colleges are. They're like, oh, I want to go into a program. Hopefully I want to make some money and be successful. Then you find yourself on a farm in Trenton doing things you never thought you were doing and having the impact that you probably didn't even think about back then. And that's what it's about. You also, I saw great joy in your face when you talked about the stories from the farmers. I could tell you really enjoyed that experience as well. So it wasn't just about math and numbers.
No, definitely not.
But around this table, I think nobody was smiling more than your professor. So Vanessa, tell us a little bit about what it's like to mentor students like Femi, and how have you guided other students through their research, and what do you hope in the end that they take away from these experiences?
It's always interesting because every semester it's a different group of students. So just when you think you've figured it out, you have a whole new group, a whole new dynamics. This class was pretty interesting because there were different level of like camaraderie between the students that I hadn't seen before. And there we sit in Hutchinson. We have a studio environment, and they're sort of in little bays. But what was really great is they push each other in a way that I push them as much as I can, but there's like internal competition between them, but also I feel like it's a healthy competition, and it was really exciting to see the work that they were doing. It's challenging working on a site that was far away. It was hard to coordinate some of the visits that they had to do. But one of the things that we built in as part of this community engaged learning pilot was a reflection component. And that was actually some of the most interesting feedback that I got from the class is sort of, they had to do some volunteering at a soup kitchen, right? And the idea was volunteer at the soup kitchen and then sort of create a sort of one-page reflection, but also a series of diagrams about what did you learn working in that space about how you would want to design it, because that was part of their program for the design of the project, right? There was a community kitchen that was part of their design project. And it was really interesting to sort of see and hear the experience of the students and how that then informed their design. And that was one of the key components, right? Is a lot of times we don't have the opportunity to actually work or do the functions that are required in the spaces that we're designing, right? We design housing, but housing is the easiest building type because you live in a house, you pretty much know, it's usually a kitchen, a bathroom, a living room, and a bedroom. But with some of these community spaces, they were able to help define what those were. But you need to understand how you move in that space. So that was a really interesting exercise. They also did some really cool collages. And collages was a really interesting exercise for them. They did sort of a 2D collage, but then they also did these 3D collages. They were looking at sort of complicated issues, and I think it helped them think about things a little bit differently. One student did an amazing collage that she wanted to paint. So she actually did a painting of her collage and brought it to the final review, a huge canvas painting. And it's amazing. We're still trying to get a hold of that paint tip. But it's been great to allow them the opportunity to express their own thoughts in different creative ways. A lot of times they want specific requirements and a checklist of things to do, and we have to give it to them. But at the same time, like, rules are there as guidance, and it's been exciting to see how they evolve those projects. I think Femi, I don't know if you remember his presentation, his midterm, he created a video, which was not a requirement, but it was a really awesome animated, fun video about potatoes, because they each had to do this like early research on food to understand food as a system, a larger system, a sort of understanding like how is it cultivated? How does it get to where it needs to go? What's the manufacturing process? Like, what's all of that? And so they had to do drawings and all of these things, but he went above and beyond and did a video with an awesome song. And that was, he made everybody sort of sit and watch that before he started his presentation. That was pretty fun.
Well, I hope that we can get the link to that video. But I think I had an opportunity to see some of the evolution of this work that you're talking about, because I was a judge in what seemed to be like a Shark Tank-esque kind of event here at Kean for our students. And I remember you all doing the presentation on the cookbook that came out of your food pantry or food bank experience, and just making sure that individuals who were getting produce and so forth, right, maybe even from the farm, how they were able to then turn that into dinner and lunch and things that they could, really enjoy. So tell me a little bit about that, because I know that you and your team were one of the winners in our Shark Tank-esque program.
So that project started from another studio semester, amazingly. It was my third year for a semester, and we were given like this task of creating a project on food as well, but just community food, so like food banks and food pantries. And so me and my team, we put in teams of 3. It was me, Erwin, and Bria. So we made, we kind of created Project Upcycle, which is what the project is called. And it's a project where we are making cookbooks based on what the food banks give. So we noticed the amount of food waste that goes into the community, and how much, even though they're getting food from the food banks, they may not be able to use all of those ingredients. So they just end up throwing it out because they don't know what to do with it. So we wanted to make cookbooks to kind of guide them and help them through making those delicious food just based on food that they would rather have thrown away. So from that project, it's still going until now. So we've submitted for Research Day. So you'll see the end of that project there and then. But this semester with Vanessa also kind of inspired me with that as well, because I was also working with food. So I got to volunteer at different food banks and see the way they operated and see the way the community came in, got their food. They kind of look through the bag. Okay, what can I use? What can I not use? So it's like giving them like a tool to make sure they can actually use everything that they're getting. So that's where that project came from. That's where it's going. Right now, we're actually making a mural on Kruger Pantry, actually, because we're partner with Kruger Pantry as well. So we're making a mural on what they stand for and letting students know that there's a pantry in campus. And you can use them. You can get free food. You can get laundry. You can get things that you would need that maybe you don't know on campus as well.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to think about, the education, right? And your commitment to community, whether on campus or off campus. As Mike mentioned, as Kean being an anchor institution, that we are really out in community trying to understand the needs, the social systems, how we can impact social systems through our education. So talk to me a little bit. So we've talked about all this wonderful stuff and these ideals, the ideation, the innovation. What are the obstacles? What did you learn? What were the challenges along the way that made you stop and think, like, wow, how do I solve this problem? Or why am I even in this program? What were some of those challenges?
Will definitely be time, because as Vanessa said, studio can take up a whole lot of time, a lot of sleepless nights. Not too many though this semester, thankfully. But just managing my time, making sure, because I also play lacrosse, so making sure I have time to focus on that, making sure I have time to focus on my studies, my religion, and just kind of combining all of that. Some other troubles I've run through was just working in a group setting as well, because although it sounds like fantasies, there's also like kind of in a group issues that may come up. So just trying to figure those out, but still kind of keeping that camaraderie and making sure that everyone stays, satisfied and happy. Yeah, I think those are some of the problems I've ran through while doing this research.
I'm glad you mentioned group dynamic, because I think when you graduate from college and you're on to whether it's grad school or the work environment, learning to operate in teams is so important. I think that's a skill, a soft skill that we don't add to our learning outcomes, Mike, but I think it's such a critical component to working, to being in the workplace, right? Being in the real world, as folks used to say.
Speaking about outcomes, the journey of research is really powerful. Each point that you've talked about, whether it be an activity in class by creating an animated video on potatoes, which sounds really, I don't know how interesting it sounds, but I'm curious now. So, but it seems like the journey for you is really helped you mature as a student, as an individual. But at the end of the process, or the journey is important, but at the end of the process, usually there's some insights. And this is for you, Vanessa, in terms of, what are some valuable findings or insights that we found so far? And also, what have we learned about revitalizing urban spaces?
One of the lessons that I learned is we have to be flexible in understanding that the timing for the semester and the availability of students to be able to go to the site or meet with community partners. It's very hard to coordinate that within a semester that has class times where students are meeting at a specific time that may not work with. They might have a class right before to get to the site, and Trenton's pretty far. We had them actually do a lot of their own visits because coordinating everybody at the same time was tricky. But I think one of the things that I found the most impactful was the trip to Capital City Farm for the students. We opened it up to other classes and some of the other faculty that were focusing on the other sites that the other studios were doing were in Elizabeth, a similar program, but their sites were up here on Morris Ave by the 7-Eleven. So they were looking at a food sort of space there, and we were down by Capital City Farm. But because everybody was focused on food and urban agriculture and food justice, we wanted them to see the Capital City Farm. And I think hearing the stories of the farmers there was super impactful for all of the students and the faculty, and understanding how a local project can have a larger impact. I think was really important for them to see it, right? Not just to like research it from afar. So I think as much as we're able to let or get the students out into the field is really important. It's tricky and challenging to coordinate schedules and timing and field trip forms and permissions. But once they get there, I mean, we went late in the semester. They already had a lot of the program and curriculum already set, but it was able to inform their projects. I think they definitely a lot of that changed. Also, I remember we weren't able to all go out to the site together, but we required them to go on their own. And the day they came back, I was like, how was your site visit? And they all were like, had these looks on their faces that it was just so different from them walking there than to the research the desk research they had been doing based off of information that was available online. And I think part of the challenge is they're working on design research, right? Design strategies, but they're also dealing with a lot of really complicated, layered issues that is very hard to tackle and dissect in a short amount of time. So in a perfect world, this is a year-long project, not a semester-long project or a multi-year-long project, because there's lots of layers to unpack. And they also have to do all of these other classes and other things. So that part, I think, was pretty challenging, is how to focus in a small amount of time and be able to really interpret complicated issues and create some sort of design outcome out of really challenging social conditions.
Mm. So part of the identity of an anchor institution is this community engaged learning process, these courses that engage students in communities. So, but there are other courses that we have here. So tell me a little bit about the difference and why it's important to seek out courses that get you engaged into a community engaged learning process, to learn more about the history and the design and the structure of a city, rather than taking another class that's exclusively theory-based and you're sitting in the classroom and it's, 50 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever it is. Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective.
Yes, so I'd add research and tech class. So that's like the class where you have to kind of do research and then come up with a 10-page paper about that research. Going into that class, I didn't really know the importance of doing research and writing in like a research format. But that definitely did help me out because that was like my first research class that I had to take. And I took it sophomore year. And it seemed everything after that has had to like come from that class. Because from that research class, I've been able to do 2 research projects because of how much interest I've found in research, but just voicing out my opinion and voicing out what I'm interested in. So definitely the university offering those specific research classes definitely does help. But also kind of leaving flexibility for other classes like studio and allowing students to be able to do their own research and come up with their own things from the studio as well. Because I know the Masters of Architecture classes also offers thesis. So that's when you kind of feel free to come up with whatever you want, but it seems so far away. So just having the freedom to do that now while in 4th year definitely did help and just fuel my passion for research as well.
So when you leave Kean and you reflect upon your experience here, whether it be at a graduate school somewhere else, will these classes that you took here with this experience be the ones that stand out most to you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's the one that's brought me the most joy, that's brought me the most kind of recognition. So, yeah.
That's great.
It sounds like community-centered research is critical, I think, to the learning trajectory when you're involved in, whether it's an architectural undergraduate program, because it then enables you to see where research can take you, right? And so for a urban-centered, urban research institute, I think that's the differentiation for Kean versus some other institutions. We are really understanding that in urban, we need to be able to connect with community, have a community-centered approach, and then integrate that into the classroom, into the theory that our students are learning. So I heard you say, Vanessa, that one semester is sometimes difficult. So it sounds like we have an opportunity for innovation at Kean to think about how we create maybe multi-year syllabi with programs that include theory and practical experience, and that really will then shoot our students into places that they can't even imagine, like being on a farm, as an architect student, doing food justice. So that's really cool. Share with me, Vanessa, what you think the trajectory is for this in terms of what is the impact, this research. I guess what I'm trying to say is what you hope this research will accomplish. This was a great pilot to do community engaged work with your students. What is the impact on policy, maybe the urban environment in particular? What do you think the students will get out of this, but also professors involved in this work, the university as a whole, and the community that we're serving?
This semester, I'm doing something slightly different. It's not a studio class, it's a seminar class, but it's called Community Design, Activism, Advocacy, and Participatory Processes. And it's trying to understand the history of community design and really different ways of the architect serving as sort of a facilitator to try and look at, how we can work with community to sort of co-create sort of better visions for what we want to see in the neighborhood. And so we're actually partnering as part of this community engaged learning initiative with the Watson Institute and in the Inclusive Healthy Communities effort to really look at specific municipalities within the state of New Jersey to think about inclusivity and accessible design. So last week on Valentine's Day, we went with our students. We walked down Morris Avenue looking at Elizabeth as our first example. And we walked down Morris Avenue through the park to the train station, went a little bit around, and came back. And our students are going to be presenting. They did some reflections today in class, but they have their midterm presentation next week. And they're going to be talking about specific areas that they would want to think about ways of working with community to see how to make certain things better based off of their observations. So they're looking at community gardens or access to green space. They're looking at the sidewalks. There's another group looking at bus stops and the fact that you don't know exactly where the bus stop is when you're walking down Morris Avenue. And then they're looking at wayfinding in related to signage for like trying to find the train station at the Elizabeth Street station. It's not exactly clear at that intersection. So it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with. But I think the goal for me is how the School of Public Architecture and Michael Graves College also has the School of Design, but how we can work with internally within the university and other sort of programs to look at some of these larger scale issues that the community may want some help with, right? And how we can use design thinking to help inform ways of making the community sort of a place better for everybody. And so really sort of talking about how we can be this anchor institution, right? How we can support community projects through student research. Because a lot of these communities, they have needs, but they don't have the funding to be able to pay for doing the work that they need to do, or they need some help maybe visualizing visualizing what could be, right? And to be able to get funding, right? There's sort of like, how do we help advance some of these projects? And so it's the beginning, but hopefully we can really look at more community engaged learning. Service learning is sometimes what it's called. The university also, at least the architecture program, has been looking and exploring design build. And they did actually, Femi, you were part of the design build in the WKU campus in China, and he just came back from a winter 10-day design build. There were 5 teams. They had students from the Kean USA campus and from the Wenzhou China campus. And I don't know if you want to talk about that really quickly. I don't know if we have time, but it was a really amazing experience. I wasn't there. I wasn't one of the faculty involved, but it was interdisciplinary. not just architecture. It was some of the other disciplines within the design school. And there were student teams that were both from KUSA and from WKU. And that experience is life-changing. I mean, I just heard some of the stories, and there will be some video and press about it soon, but I don't know if you want to share that.
Yeah, the project was titled Borrowing Local Ecologies, and what the kind of the local government wanted out of the WKU students and the students over here as well was to kind of bring their minds together and kind of, because the teams were comprised of, I believe it was 10 students per group, so it was about 5 Kean USA students and faculty and 5 WKU students and faculty. So they wanted us to kind of collaborate on this project and come up with something that we kind of make together, something that combines the ecology of the US and China, but we're also careful to respect the culture and make sure that we're building respectfully on their site as well. So, this experience over there was amazing. We got to taste different food, got to visit all over China, to Shanghai, and to the island that we were on, and just to see how people live their lives. I think what was one of the most surprising was the way they ate. I tend to just eat whatever I want, whatever time, however much I want. But it's they have a certain amount of food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I kept getting seconds, but I felt like I was the only one getting seconds because everyone was just sitting down. They have the small portions, they finished it, and it was just done. It's wow. But I just got up 5 times. It's getting more. The food was delicious, so that was good. But just seeing the different cultures and trying to join them, intermingle with them, and also kind of teach them what we're about as well. I think they were also amazed by that.
By the end of your trip, were any of the other students going up for seconds?
Yes, that's
they learned it from you. Yeah.
Say, did you influence the culture to go through seconds? So let me just say that I'm going to put a shameless plug in here for the John S. Watson Institute for Urban Policy and Research, which is here at Kean. And it's an applied research center. So at the center of the work of the John S. Watson Institute is whether it's a policy research or research that informs policy through some sort of theory, right? At the end of the day, it's how do we impact the community and how do we center community in research. And I think that is something that we are embarking on even more at Kean, and excited to have that interdisciplinary approach to doing that. So really excited to see what will come out of the work with the Department of Disabilities on inclusive communities. Really excited about that work, and hopefully we can come back and have a conversation about that in the future. But I just want to thank you, Femi and Vanessa, for you both joining us today and sharing your experiences. This was really an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share with anyone who's passionate about research and urban design.
Until next time, thank you for listening to this episode of Urban Impact.
Thank you for listening to Urban Impact, a podcast produced by Kean, New Jersey's Urban Research University. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get podcasts. For more information, visit kean.edu/urban-impact.